When Jimin made Jungkook jealous unknowingly, Jungkook's reaction made the video go viral instantly. Flushed face heart, with arrow. Jungkook froze mid-stride as the mic slipped from his fingers and clattered against the rehearsal floor, the sound slicing through the room with a metallic crack that made everyone whip their heads toward him. "Why did he smile at you like that?" His voice was low, almost trembling, the kind of tone no one in the studio had ever heard from him before. The lights hummed above them, flickering faintly as if reacting to the sudden tension. Jimin blinked, breath caught halfway in his chest, the warmth from the choreographer's earlier compliment still lingering on his skin. He hadn't even realized Jungkook was watching. He hadn't realized the look on Jungkook's face would resemble someone standing at the edge of a cliff, caught between jumping and turning back. Rehearsal paused instantly. Staff members pretended to busy themselves with cables and tablets, but their eyes kept darting to the center of the room where Jungkook and Jimin stood facing each other like two magnets fighting between attraction and explosion. It hadn't always been like this, tension sharp enough to cut through the air. But pressure had been building for weeks, silently, dangerously, like water rising behind a cracked dam. Hours before the rehearsal, Jimin had woken from a restless sleep. He had dreamed of running but not knowing from what, his heart aching for something he couldn't name. Jungkook, on the other hand, had arrived early to the studio, pushing his body through extra rounds of practice as if movement could silence the storm brewing inside him. Jungkook had been worried for days. Jimin had seemed distant, smiling lightly, laughing politely, but never with the warmth Jungkook depended on far more than he wanted to admit. It terrified him, the idea of losing something he never openly claimed to have. And the fear hid beneath playful annoyance, casual glances, and jokes that didn't land quite right. Jimin stepped forward slowly, soft sweat dampening the collar of his shirt. "Kook, why are you acting like this? It was just a compliment." His voice was gentle, but not yielding. Jimin never backed down when he felt cornered. His courage was quiet but unshakable. "Just a compliment." Jungkook's laugh came out wrong, too sharp, too wounded. "He touched your shoulder. You smiled like he told you something only you two understood." "That's ridiculous," Jimin whispered, though his pulse betrayed him, fluttering faster. He had always been careful with emotions, watching them like fragile birds in his palms. Jungkook, however, felt everything with the force of a storm. Their eyes locked, and for a moment the room disappeared. Jimin saw it then, the jealousy Jungkook was fighting so desperately to hide. But underneath it was something deeper, more fragile, something that made Jimin's breath catch. Fear of losing him. And maybe Jimin understood because he felt it too. He just mastered the art of hiding it much better. The music director cleared her throat, trying to break the tension, but the moment had already slipped through their fingers. One camera, forgotten on a stand, blinked with its red light still on. Recording. Neither of them noticed. The video would go viral within hours, but right now, they were only two boys who had spent years pretending their hearts didn't move in sync. The choreographer approached awkwardly, his earlier compliment now feeling like a spark accidentally thrown into dry grass. "Jungkook," he murmured, "I didn't mean anything by, I know." Jungkook cut him off, eyes not leaving Jimin. "It's not about you." And then he walked out. The hallway outside the studio was dim, quiet except for the muffled echo of distant footsteps. Jungkook leaned against the wall, forcing himself to breathe. He hated how reactive he could be. He hated how Jimin could unravel him with a single smile meant for someone else. He hated how much he cared. Minutes passed before Jimin found him. Instead of speaking, he leaned beside Jungkook, their shoulders inches apart, close enough for warmth to pass through the air like static. Jimin didn't push him. He never did. That was the worst part. Jungkook wished he would. He wished Jimin would demand the truth because maybe then Jungkook would stop running from it. "You scared me back there," Jimin finally said, voice low. "I scared myself," Jungkook admitted. Jimin turned to him, his expression softened not by pity but by understanding that had been forming for years. "You know I care about you. More than most people do." "Most?" Jungkook gave a small, humorless smile. "I don't want most, Hyung." Jimin inhaled sharply. For once, he had no perfectly measured words. Only silence slipped between them, a silence filled with years of unspoken questions and unanswered emotions. Later that night, the video leaked. Not the entire rehearsal, just the moment Jungkook dropped his mic, the camera zooming in on his expression, raw, jealous. vulnerable in a way that idols never allowed themselves to be seen. It spread like wildfire, analyzed from every angle, fans debating the tension, the meaning behind every micro-expression. Staff panicked, trying to control the damage, but the internet was already ablaze. While the world speculated, Jungkook sat alone in the dorm living room, hoodie pulled over his head, a heavy knot forming in his chest. He feared Jimin would be angry with him. He feared he had pushed too far. He feared he had shown too much. When the door opened softly, Jungkook didn't look up. But he felt Jimin's presence, warm, steady, impossible to ignore. Jimin sat beside him, pulling the hood gently from his head. "You think I'm upset?" Jimin asked quietly. "Aren't you?" Jungkook's voice cracked despite his efforts. "No." Jimin exhaled slowly. "I'm relieved." Jungkook finally looked at him. "Relieved?" Jimin nodded, eyes glowing with a vulnerability he usually hid carefully. "Because now you aren't the only one who's been exposed." Jungkook stared, confusion blending with hope. "Hyung, what are you saying?" Jimin rested his head lightly on Jungkook's shoulder. "That you weren't the only one jealous today." Something inside Jungkook unraveled, quietly, beautifully, like a knot loosening after being pulled tight for too long. And though the world outside buzzed with theories and exaggerations, inside that small, dim dorm room, everything finally stilled. For the first time in weeks, Jungkook felt the storm inside him ease as Jimin whispered, "Next time, you don't have to break the room to tell me what you feel." Jungkook laughed, soft and embarrassed. "I didn't mean to." "I know," Jimin said. "But I'm glad you did." The night folded around them gently. No cliffhanger. No unsaid words left hovering between them. Just clarity, quiet, powerful, overdue. When morning came, they would face the world together. The rumors, the analysis, the viral firestorm. But tonight, Jungkook rested his head atop Jimin's, wrapping an arm around him with a peace he hadn't felt in years. This time, he was not afraid of being seen, and Jimin, closing his eyes, was not afraid of being held. The dorm was still dark when Jimin woke with a start, heart pounding as if someone had shouted his name in the middle of a dream. The faint glow from the city slipped through the blinds, painting thin silver lines across the room. He turned his head and found Jungkook asleep on the couch beside him, hoodie half off, hair messy from the way he had buried his face into the cushions. Their bodies were close, closer than either had dared to be before last night's confession broke through the last of their defenses. Jimin raised himself slowly, trying not to wake him, but Jungkook stirred instantly. "Hyung, where are you going?" His voice was hoarse, still heavy from sleep, the kind of voice that made Jimin's chest feel too tight. "I wasn't going anywhere," Jimin whispered, brushing Jungkook's bangs off his forehead. "You were sleeping too close to the edge. You could have just held me in place," Jungkook murmured, half awake, half honest. Jimin's fingers froze. Even in the dim room, Jungkook could sense the change in his breathing. Jungkook opened his eyes fully now, gazing at Jimin with a mixture of vulnerability and boldness that didn't match the sleepy tilt of his head. "Don't look at me like that," Jimin whispered. "Like what?" "Like you want something you're afraid to ask for." Jungkook sat up slowly, his shoulder brushing Jimin's. "I'm not afraid anymore." Jimin inhaled sharply, but before he could respond, Jungkook leaned in. Their foreheads touched, barely, but the heat between them surged instantly, electric, soft, dangerous. Then the loud buzz of Jungkook's phone shattered the moment. He pulled back, frowning. The screen lit up with dozens of unread messages. Their manager. PR team. A news outlet. 3 separate hashtags. Jimin's stomach dropped. He already knew. Of course the video had exploded overnight. Of course clips and slowed-down analyses were everywhere. Of course the internet had managed to dissect their micro-expressions frame by frame. Jungkook rubbed his face. "I didn't think it would be this bad." "It's not your fault," Jimin said, though the worry in his voice betrayed him. "It kind of is," Jungkook muttered. "I dropped a mic in the middle of rehearsal because I got jealous over one touch. That's not normal, Hyung. It is when you care." Jimin placed a hand over Jungkook's. "And it wasn't just jealousy." Jungkook swallowed hard. "Yeah. It wasn't." The knock on the door startled both of them. Their manager stepped in without waiting. His expression was tight, stressed, but strangely gentle. "We need to talk." Jimin and Jungkook exchanged a look, one full of dread, unasked questions, and a silent promise to face this together. Their manager sat down across from them. The video got out faster than we could control it. The internet is divided. Some people think it's staged. Some think it's real. Some think you two fought. Some think you two are, he hesitated, glancing between them. Involved. Jimin's chest clenched. Jungkook's hand tightened on his knee before he even realized he had placed it there. Tell us what we need to do, Jungkook said. That depends, the manager replied carefully, on whether the two of you can keep your emotions in check during public schedules. Jimin looked down, unable to hide the conflict storming inside him. They had spent years crafting professionalism as armor, as a shield against misinterpretation. But after last night's honesty, going back felt like suffocating himself all over again. Jungkook, however, lifted his chin. We can. The manager studied him. Can you really? Yesterday you reacted emotionally. If something like that happens again, it won't, Jungkook said quickly. Too quickly. Jimin felt the sting of the words. Something in them felt like a step backward, a sudden reinstatement of distance they had barely begun to close. Their manager stood. We have a live broadcast today. Don't give them anything to twist. After that, we'll decide how to handle this. When he left, silence swept the room like cold wind. Jimin pulled his hand away. So we go back to pretending? Jungkook flinched. Hyung, that's not what I meant. But that's what you said. Jungkook reached for him. I said what I had to. They're already watching us too closely. Jimin stepped back. You think I don't know that? You think I haven't lived carefully for years? You think I don't think about every move I make? Then why does it sound like you're mad at me? Because you said last night you weren't afraid anymore. And the first thing you did this morning was get scared again. Jungkook looked wrecked, genuinely, desperately torn. I'm scared of losing you. Not of being seen with you. Jimin closed his eyes. Then don't push me away. I'm trying not to, Jungkook said, voice breaking. But the world is pushing back harder. The vulnerability in his voice cracked something inside Jimin, protectiveness, longing, frustration all swirling into one heated, overwhelming mix. He walked to Jungkook slowly, grabbed the collar of his hoodie, and pulled him closer until their breaths collided in the inch between them. Then let's not let the world win. Jungkook's eyes darkened with emotion so intense it almost frightened him. Hyung, Jimin pressed his forehead to Jungkook's again, their breaths uneven, their hands trembling slightly as they gripped each other's sleeves. Whatever happens today, Jimin whispered, don't lie to yourself. I won't, Jungkook murmured. Not anymore. Hours later, under blinding studio lights during their live broadcast, the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Every time Jimin laughed, Jungkook's eyes found him. When Jungkook smiled, Jimin's shoulders softened. Fans noticed, cameras noticed, staff noticed. Jungkook didn't look away this time. He didn't suppress the softness in his expression. He didn't flinch when Jimin bumped his shoulder affectionately during a question segment. Jimin didn't hide his warmth either. They weren't reckless. But they weren't invisible, not anymore. After the broadcast, as they walked out of the studio, Jimin slipped his hand into Jungkook's for the briefest second, so quick it could have been a mistake, so natural it couldn't have been anything but real. Jungkook's breath hitched, and a small, genuine smile broke across his face. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. For the first time, it felt like they were finally beginning, not pretending, not hiding, but stepping into something they had been circling. 4 years, and even with the world watching, Jimin and Jungkook walked forward together, not as an act, not as a strategy, but as two hearts tired of being silent. The storm around them was only growing, but inside, something finally felt steady. Rain hammered against the glass walls of the backstage hallway, creating a rhythmic thunder that seemed to match Jungkook's heartbeat. The live broadcast was over, but the chaos it caused was only beginning. Comments were exploding online, dissecting every brush of their shoulders, every glance that lingered too long, every breath that seemed to falter when the other moved too close. But none of that noise mattered compared to what was happening inside Jungkook now. He was pacing, restless, wired, unable to sit still, while Jimin sat on the low couch nearby, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor like he was holding a dozen emotions together with nothing but willpower. You saw what they posted? Jungkook said finally, turning sharply toward him. They're twisting everything. Every single moment from today is going viral. And they're saying, let them say it, Jimin replied softly, not looking up. Jungkook froze. Drops of rain slid down the skylight above them, streaks of water glimmering under the corridor lights. Hyung, do you even know what you're saying? Jimin lifted his gaze then, slowly, calmly, but his eyes burned with a depth Jungkook rarely encountered, an emotion not loud or dramatic, but quiet and unstoppable. I'm saying I don't want to run from this anymore. The words hit Jungkook with the force of impact. His hands curled into fists at his sides as he swallowed hard, fighting back the storm rising inside him, equal parts longing, fear, and something dangerously close to relief. Hyung, Jungkook said, voice thick, you really mean that? I do. Jungkook sat down beside him, but the space between them felt charged, almost electric. The soft smell of Jimin's cologne, something citrusy, something warm, filled Jungkook's senses until it became impossible to focus on anything else. Do you remember what you told me this morning? Jimin asked softly. Jungkook nodded. That I wasn't afraid anymore. And I believed you, Jimin whispered, eyes dropping to Jungkook's hands. But I need you to prove it. Not to me, to yourself. The air trembled. Jungkook slowly uncurled his fists, staring at his palms as though trying to see what he was still holding onto. Jimin shifted closer. Kook, look at me. He did, and in that moment, nothing outside the dim corridor existed, no cameras, no fans, no rumors. Just Jimin's dark eyes, reflecting the storm both of them had been trying to deny for years. I don't want to hide how I feel, Jimin whispered, voice barely audible. Not when it's hurting you. Not when it's hurting me. Jungkook's breath caught. Something broke loose inside him, something he had held behind steel walls, chained and buried so deep he had forgotten what it felt like to breathe freely. Come here, Jungkook said softly. Jimin blinked but didn't resist when Jungkook took his hand and pulled him gently onto his lap. Their breaths tangled, their chests brushing, the heat between them rising like a tide impossible to push back. Is this okay? Jungkook murmured, his thumb brushing Jimin's jaw, the gesture tender but trembling. Jimin nodded without hesitation, hands sliding to rest around Jungkook's shoulders. I've wanted to be this close all day. Jungkook's heart stuttered. Hyung, but before he could finish, Jimin leaned forward, pressing his forehead against Jungkook's, breath warm, voice trembling with honesty that left Jungkook undone. You weren't the only one jealous, Jimin confessed again, but this time the words came out heavier, weighted with everything he had held inside. When those backup dancers kept hovering around you, I felt it. I hated it. And I hated myself for feeling it. Jungkook inhaled sharply. You hid it well. I've been hiding it for years, Jimin said, a small helpless laugh slipping from him. You're not the only one who's been scared. Jungkook's hands moved on instinct, one cupping the back of Jimin's neck, the other gripping his waist with a need he could no longer disguise. The space between them disappeared, their breaths mingled, heat radiating off both their bodies as their closeness intensified. Jungkook could feel Jimin's heart racing against his chest, matching his own, syncing with a terrifying, beautiful rhythm. Then the door clicked. They froze. Someone entered the hallway, a staff member hurrying with a clipboard, muttering to herself. She didn't look up. She didn't notice them in the shadowed corner. Jimin let out a shaky exhale against Jungkook's lips. We should move. No, Jungkook whispered, tightening his grip. I don't want to. Jimin let out a quiet sound, half laugh, half confession, and rested his head on Jungkook's shoulder. The staff member walked away without ever seeing them. Jimin slowly rose, taking Jungkook's hand and pulling him to his feet. Come with me. Jungkook followed him through the hallway, their hands brushing only lightly but burning with restraint. They ended up in an unused dressing room, the lights dim, the room silent except for their uneven breathing. Once the door closed, Jimin turned, a storm in his eyes. Kook, what do you want from me? Jungkook stepped closer until their chests brushed. Everything you've been afraid to give. And if I give it? Jimin whispered, then I'll take care of it. Jimin's breath hitched. You promise? With my whole life. Jimin reached out, fingertips tracing the line of Jungkook's jaw, his voice steady even as his hands shook. Then don't let fear pull you away again. Jungkook leaned in, his lips brushing Jimin's cheek, slow and deliberate, a touch warm enough to make Jimin close his eyes. I'm done running, Jungkook murmured. From you. From myself. Jimin wrapped his arms around him, and Jungkook held him back with a force that said everything he couldn't. For the first time, there were no walls and no guards and no lies. Only truth, raw and terrifying and beautiful. And as rain continued to fall outside the dressing room window, Jimin and Jungkook stayed in each other's arms, letting the world rage while they finally allowed themselves to feel everything they had buried for far too long. The silence in the dressing room felt alive, pulsing with every breath they exchanged. Jimin's arms were still around Jungkook, and Jungkook's grip around his waist had not loosened since the moment he promised he wouldn't run anymore. Their bodies fit too naturally, too dangerously, like two pieces that had been trying for years to pretend they weren't meant to interlock. Jungkook's heartbeat was loud enough for Jimin to hear against his chest. He drew back slightly, just enough to see Jungkook's face, still flushed from everything that had happened minutes earlier, still burning with emotions he didn't know how to hide anymore. "Kook," Jimin whispered. Jungkook lifted his eyes, dark, intense, almost overwhelming. "Say it again." "Say what?" "That you're not hiding anymore." Jimin's lips parted, and Jungkook felt the answer before he heard it, the warmth of Jimin's breath fanning against his cheek. "I'm not." Something in Jungkook's expression softened and hardened at the same time, a complicated tangle of relief and hunger, fear and certainty. He touched Jimin's jaw lightly, thumb tracing the line of it slowly, reverently, as if memorizing him in a new way. "Hyung," he murmured, voice barely steady, "I'm scared." Jimin blinked. "Of what?" "That I'll want more than I should." Jimin's breath hitched, not from fear, but from the honesty of it. "And if I want the same?" Jungkook froze, hands tightening on Jimin's waist before he could stop himself. Their noses brushed. Jimin's fingers curled in Jungkook's hoodie. The air thickened, heated, growing hotter every second they didn't pull away. But before the moment could ignite fully, a sharp knock slammed through the silence. They jerked apart just as the door swung open. A staff coordinator stood in the doorway, eyes going wide at the sight of the two of them, Jimin flushed, Jungkook breathing hard, their clothes rumpled from how tightly they'd been holding onto each other. The room held its breath. The staff member swallowed. "Why you two are needed for a meeting. Now." Her gaze flicked between them, reading too much, or maybe everything, and then she left hurriedly, shutting the door behind her. Jimin let out a shaky laugh. "We're terrible at hiding, aren't we?" "We weren't hiding," Jungkook said, stepping close again. "Not from each other. But the world, we'll deal with the world." The conviction in Jungkook's voice sent a shiver through Jimin. Not fear. Not hesitation. Something deeper, but they didn't have time to savor it. The meeting room was buzzing when they arrived. Their manager looked exhausted, PR team tense, and the CEO's expression was unreadable, never a good sign. Screens on the wall displayed hashtags, reaction clips, slowed-down videos analyzing Jungkook's jealousy, Jimin's warmth, every moment between them that had been captured by accident. Jimin's heart sank. Jungkook reached for his hand instinctively, but stopped himself just in time. The CEO spoke first. "We need to address this. Now." Jungkook stepped forward before anyone else could. "Whatever you're thinking, we didn't do anything wrong. We're not blaming you," the CEO said calmly. "But the public perception is spinning into territory that can't be ignored." A PR staffer tapped her tablet. "There are articles suggesting romantic tension between you two. A few claiming a secret relationship. Some think the jealousy was scripted. Others are speculating more intensely." Jimin's jaw clenched. Jungkook's shoulders stiffened. Their manager looked at them both with worried eyes. "We need to decide whether to deny everything or stay vague." "And if we stay vague?" Jimin asked. "It fuels rumors." "And if we deny?" Jungkook countered. "It kills them," the PR leader said simply. Jimin inhaled sharply. "Kills them." Kills what they had finally begun to admit. Kills everything that had happened in that dressing room. Everything he had confessed. Jungkook heard the weight in those words too. Something inside him snapped tight. "So you want us to lie?" Jungkook said. "No one said lie," the CEO replied. "Just frame things in a safe way." Safe, the word felt like a cold blade pressed to Jimin's chest. Jimin spoke carefully. "And what if it's not something we can frame?" The room froze, eyes fell on them, some shocked, some tense, some already panicking beneath their calm surface. "Jimin," their manager whispered, "think before you." "I have been thinking," Jimin said. "For years." Jungkook turned to him, eyes widening. The room felt like it tilted. No one moved. The CEO leaned forward, tone sharper now. Is there something you want to clarify, Jimin? Jimin opened his mouth, but Jungkook grabbed his wrist, pulling him aside into the corner before he could speak. His grip wasn't rough, but it vibrated with fear. Kook, you can't say it. Not like this. Not in that room. Why not? Jimin whispered. If we don't stop lying now, when will we? Hyung, they'll tear us apart. And if we're the ones doing it first? Jimin's voice cracked. I can't go back to pretending you're just someone I stand next to on stage. Jungkook's breath trembled. Do you regret last night? Jimin asked quietly. What? No. Never. Then why are you asking me to bury it? Because I'm trying to protect you. His voice rose, echoing too loudly in the tense conference room. All heads turned toward them. Jimin stepped closer, lowering his voice but not his intensity. I don't want protection, Kook. I want the truth. Jungkook looked torn apart, eyes stormy with the kind of pain he couldn't hide if he tried. Hyung, he whispered, I'm afraid that if we say it out loud, we'll lose everything. Jimin cupped Jungkook's face gently, so tenderly the room seemed to disappear for a fraction of a second. We already almost lost each other. Jungkook closed his eyes, breath shaking. Their manager called them back. We need your answer. Now. Jungkook and Jimin turned toward the table, their hands brushing unintentionally, sparking tension thick enough to suffocate. They sat down. The CEO repeated, Will you deny the rumors? Jimin and Jungkook exchanged a look, one that could fill entire years of meaning. Jungkook's voice was soft but steady. We can't deny that we're close. The PR team shifted uncomfortably. The CEO narrowed his eyes. And what does close mean? Jimin answered before Jungkook could. It means exactly what it sounds like. A murmur swept the room, the air tightened, lines blurred, boundaries dissolved. Jungkook reached under the table, slowly, discreetly, and found Jimin's hand. Jimin squeezed back. Their manager stared at them in disbelief. The CEO exhaled slowly. Then we have a very big problem. Jungkook and Jimin didn't flinch. For the first time, they were ready for whatever came next together. The storm outside had quieted, but the storm between them still trembled in the air. The studio hallway felt too narrow as Jimin and Jungkook stood facing each other, breaths unsteady and eyes refusing to look away. Everything that had been building, every glance, every unspoken question, every moment that had drawn them too close, finally pressed against them with nowhere left to hide. Jungkook was the first to exhale, a shaky breath that carried all the weight he had been trying to hold. We can't keep pretending this isn't happening, he whispered. His voice cracked at the edges, fragile but determined. Not anymore. Jimin's throat tightened. He had always been good at hiding what he felt, at smiling even when something hurt, but not with Jungkook, not when Jungkook was looking at him like that. I know, he murmured. But once we say it out loud, everything changes. Jungkook stepped closer, slow and careful, as if every inch mattered. Maybe it's supposed to change. Jimin's heartbeat stumbled. And if it ruins everything? It won't. Jungkook's hand lifted, hesitated, then finally touched Jimin's cheek, not with heat or desperation this time, but with a softness that shook Jimin more than anything else. We ruin things by pretending. Not by telling the truth. Jimin leaned into the touch without meaning to. And in that small, unguarded movement, something inside him fell open. Then tell me, he breathed. Tell me the truth. Jungkook's eyes flickered, but he didn't look away. I care about you more than I should. More than I ever planned to. And it scares me. His voice trembled. But losing you scares me more. Silence pressed around them, but it was a different kind of silence now, full and warm and terrifying. Jimin closed his eyes, letting the words sink into the places he'd been trying to ignore. When he opened them again, his gaze was steady. I care about you too, he confessed softly. Too much. But I'm tired of running from it. Jungkook let out a laugh that sounded like relief breaking through panic. Then don't run. Jimin smiled, small, aching, real. Stay with me tonight. Not as idols trying to figure out what's allowed. Not as two people trying not to cross a line. Just, stay with me as the person who said those words. Jungkook's breath caught. If I stay like that, I don't know if I can pretend anything is temporary. Good, Jimin whispered. I don't want temporary. The tension between them didn't disappear, it shifted, softened into something deeper, something steady. Jungkook reached for Jimin's hand, fingers intertwining without hesitation this time. No cameras. No fans. No rules. Just two hearts that had been circling each other for far too long. The world outside the studio felt far away as they stepped into the quiet room together, closing the door gently behind them. They didn't rush. They didn't fall apart. They simply sat close, knees touching, hands still intertwined, letting the truth between them settle like a calm after years of shaking ground. Jimin rested his head on Jungkook's shoulder. Jungkook let out a long, slow breath and leaned his head against Jimin's. No fireworks. No dramatic collapse. Just peace, unexpected, powerful, and theirs. For the first time, the future didn't feel like something they had to fear. It felt like something they could choose, and together, in the quiet warmth of the studio room, they finally did.